Pure and utter chaos. The recent hours for David Jenkins were just filled with pain and shock. An email from an unknown sender claimed that his wife, Lauren, was seen going into a room at a budget motel last Wednesday afternoon with the same guy she was now having lunch with. It hit David hard. He and Lauren were deeply in love, being intimate 3 to 5 times a week, and their moments together were usually intense and heartfelt. At almost 30, he believed their connection was energetic and enjoyable for both. However, he couldn't brush off the email and its consequences, leaving him feeling more tense and agitated than ever before. When he got home that day, everything changed. Arriving at the usual time around 6 p.m., he saw Lauren's car in the driveway. Still in his work clothes, he found her in the kitchen washing vegetables. Greeting her cautiously, he asked about her day. "Hi, darling, how was your day?" Lauren dried her hands and kissed him. David was taken aback by how carefree she seemed after spending the day with someone else. "Great, but there's some bad news about the project we're working on. Looks like I'll have to go to Greensboro day off on Friday. Do some preliminary work. And keep an eye on the motel for Lauren and her lover," he thought. "Well, at least you don't have to stay overnight and we'll still spend the whole weekend together," Lauren suggested. "Since you can't predict when you'll be back home, could you call me when you leave Greensboro? I'll try to prepare dinner as best as I can." David hesitated. Yesterday he wouldn't have noticed or thought twice about how attentive Lauren was, trying to make a joint dinner possible despite his unplanned business trip. Now he wondered if she was asking for a 2-hour window to erase any traces of her lover. "Sure, I'll call you when I have a better idea of when I'll leave Greensboro. And I'll give you a call when I know what time I'll be home, all right?" Since the plan for Friday now seemed to make it easier for Lauren to deceive again, assuming it was indeed her in the motel, David wondered, though it wasn't usual, she usually didn't shower right away upon returning home. While going through the mail and stirring vegetables, he nervously considered if the sudden shower was connected to the news in the earlier email. During dinner, David was visibly lost in thought. Lauren noticed and asked if something else was wrong besides the project. She remarked on his quietness and distant demeanor, seeking concise responses. "No, sorry. I guess I'm just tired and already thinking about what I need to do tomorrow to get ready for the trip to Greensboro," David said. He understood the importance of acting normal to avoid raising suspicions. David found the situation almost amusing. What now constituted normal? He pondered the possibilities. His wife beating him to the punch, a prank, or a mistaken email. What if it was an entirely different woman, and the sender mistook her for his wife? The confidence he had in his happiness yesterday was now replaced with doubt and confusion. After clearing dinner and watching some TV, David and Lauren discussed weekend plans before getting ready for bed. David had mentioned going to sleep early, since he had to work early for the trip. The thought of what he would do if Lauren took steps with another man tonight made his stomach knot. He thought about Wednesdays, and if there were any recent patterns in their relationship. With horror, he realized it was about 50-50. Tying it to her post-work shower. Feeling in the dark, David tried to figure out the deceitful situation. Lauren got into bed first and David joined her. She quickly snuggled up behind him, hugging him tightly and playfully suggested, "Can I distract you from work for 30 minutes, my love?" Lauren reached to scratch his chest with her nails. He patiently stuck to plan A and replied, "As much as I would like to, dear. Neither today nor tomorrow will I be of much use to you. I'm just too preoccupied with this project hanging over me." Saying this, he couldn't believe how much his life had changed in the 60 seconds it took to read and understand that simple email he received just 10 hours ago. "It's okay, dear, I understand. I just thought that if you were up for it, I would offer you a little well-deserved stress relief." Lauren hugged David tightly, kissed him on the back of the head, wished him a good night, and turned over to the other side. David felt relief and at the same time wondered, what did she mean by "if you're up for it"? He got up and left for work before Lauren woke up, avoiding further questions or insightful looks. He realized how poorly he was handling the problem, whether real or imagined. Last night reminded him of Poe's The Telltale Heart, and realizing this, he understood that he had to avoid another night of close contact with Lauren. "Hi, sweetheart, I'm planning to work late tonight, preparing for tomorrow's trip to the Philippines. So don't worry about dinner for me, and I'll probably see you before bedtime. David left her a voicemail around noon. However, Thursday was spent without preparing for business meetings. David, being a planner and organizer by nature and profession, even though he had no undeniable evidence of her infidelity, wanted to organize everything. He called everyone he could until he found a lawyer who could meet with him the next day, and searched the internet for recording devices. Deciding he wanted to buy one, he searched for local stores with similar devices, and found one to visit before heading home. David was competent enough in his actual work that no one questioned what was going on, but his heart and mind were clearly somewhere else. He was a little late from work, then went to the surveillance equipment store and bought a simple voice-activated pen, which he thought he could hide in Lauren's purse, usually accompanying her in her office and car. He also brought work home to pretend to prepare for the trip the next day, until Lauren went to sleep. "Hi, honey. I'm so glad you're finally home," Lauren said, approaching the door when David arrived around 9 p.m. "How is the project progressing? And how about the trip?" "I think it's not bad. Since we found out about these new problems, we've allocated more resources to it. So I hope everything will be resolved on Friday for better or for worse," David replied. This is playing with fire, he thought. For better or for worse. I wonder if she feels the same way right now. Thursday evening was a relief for David. It was a repeat of the previous night, only with hugs. Lauren seemed completely unruffled, and as far as David could judge, behaved towards him the same as before. Figuratively speaking, however, he was such a complete wreck that Lauren probably had no difficulty seeming normal compared to David. On Friday, rising again at dawn, David checked the pen, placed it in Lauren's purse, and left the house. He spent some time in a cafe, then headed to meet with a lawyer at 10 a.m. David viewed this meeting solely for information gathering, but in the end, he really liked the lawyer. They discussed David's email and his still unconfirmed concerns, as well as the fact that today was a date with a potential lover that David planned to investigate himself. He admitted that he had nothing but this email. So going all in on a private detective or thousands of dollars of surveillance equipment didn't make much sense. From the lawyer, David learned about the typical reality of divorce, if it came to that. Without children, a no-fault divorce was relatively straightforward, especially considering that David and Lauren had compromised considerable incomes and similar pension plan balances. The house was mostly in debt, so its liquidation would be more of an emotional shock than a financial strain. However, David left the law office in complete bewilderment. How can I even face this nightmare and think everything won't be so bad? We were supposed to be together forever until death do us part. David spent lunchtime in a cafe, browsing the internet and continuing to study the procedure for what is called divorce. Websites abound with information on how to detect a cheating spouse, as well as how to avoid detection in an affair, hide income, and how to find it. The most instructive were sites dedicated to why spouses have affairs. Nothing David read touched on Lauren's motivation. This one fact probably led David to secretly hope deep down that all of this was a mistake. Lauren couldn't possibly betray him. They were too close, too deeply in love, too synchronized for it to be true. When he could no longer talk about deception, he packed up and left, heading to the motel. Time seemed to drag slowly, or so it seemed to David. As he drove to the motel mentioned in the email, he realized that if this affair story was indeed true, it was quite possible that Lauren did not always use the same motel. If it were true, the entire day could be in vain, and he still wouldn't know for sure. The pen he placed in her purse might eventually bear fruit, but David knew he could no longer bear this uncertainty about the state and future of his marriage. Entering the motel parking lot at 1:40 p.m., he circled around until he found a remote parking spot with a view of most of the rooms and the office. Now he just had to wait. There weren't many people coming and going at the motel parking lot at 1. So when the man parked a late model Acura, visited the office, and then entered a room on the first floor, he seemed vaguely familiar to David. The name didn't come to mind, but Dave felt like he had seen this person before. All of David's doubts ceased, as did his hopes about 5 minutes later when Lauren's Honda Accord parked next to the Acura. She jumped out with a purse in hand, approached the door of the same room and knocked quickly. After a few seconds, the man opened the door, and Lauren entered with familiar ease and confidence. "It's all true," David thought, pounding his fists on the steering wheel. How could Lauren do this to me? And why? There was simply no sense or reason in it. David had never felt so blind in his life. The planner and organizer had just had the rug pulled out from under him. David's thoughts raced left, right, up in the corner, and down like a roller coaster. And he suddenly realized that he now shared the crumbling fate of a marriage in complete and terrible crisis. Knowing that today was at least the second instance of Lauren's betrayal, and that she had avoided work to do it, made David feel that there was nothing more to gain lurking in the motel. He wasn't going to confront them by pounding on the door. That could get unpleasant. He needed time and space to calm down and prepare for whatever his next step would be. Then he remembered the pen he placed in her purse and grimaced bitterly. Real-time sound, he thought painfully. Just great. He had the presence of mind to take a few photos of the two cars parked side by side before their love nest and took a close-up of the man's car, including the license plate. Before slowly turning towards the exit and back on the road, the destination was not in his mind. But for a while he just drove aimlessly until he almost ran a red light, narrowly avoiding an accident. This shook him, so he stopped at a brewery and had a beer, trying to gather his thoughts. At first he thought he had shifted from idle suspicion to full awareness. But he realized how little he knew at the moment, and he had no idea who this guy was, how long this had been going on, and more importantly, why. As far as he knew, for 7+ years he and Lauren had been exclusive, engaged, and then married. He had enough evidence to confront, but it wasn't enough to know whether what Lauren would say would be true, as painful as it would be to listen to the recording of today's daytime rendezvous. He knew he had to wait before retrieving the pen from her purse, before saying anything to Lauren. He also knew that he wouldn't be able to be with the enamored Lauren if she were in the mood for intimacy later, after his assumed business trip. Throughout the week he had been pushing her away, citing the trip so his ready-made excuse would disappear, and further rejection of love with Lauren would likely raise her awareness that something was going wrong. So, what to do? I need that pen. Then I need to quickly confirm that there's something on it. And then I could leave the house and stay away for a few days to figure out where I stand, David mused in his mind. With the plan in mind, a cunning thought occurred to David. She thinks I'll arrive later than usual tonight. In order to shake her and her lover up, I need to call with news that I'm almost home. After finishing his beer and settling the bill, he pulled his car back onto the road and dialed Lauren's mobile number. He recorded a voicemail. "Hey dear, great news. The prep work has paid off, and everyone has done an excellent job getting everything back on track. So I'm about 30 minutes away from Charlotte, and traffic isn't that bad. I should be home around the usual time," David said aloud to himself. He headed home, and upon arrival, quickly packed a couple of bags and put them in the trunk of his car. Then he sat down and wrote a note to Lauren, depending on how the night went. He wanted to have the option to simply escape without a major confrontation. He didn't know what was on the recording, so he didn't want a full-blown confrontation just yet. Part of his reasoning was also a desire to shock her to the same extent that she had shocked him. When David called Lauren, she and her man Rob were in the throes of their second coupling of the day. Today was their last day together, and thanks to the extra runway provided by David's trip, they circled for the second time, viewing it as a celebration or a victory dance. But now it seemed like a potentially careless move. Listening to the voicemail message, she muttered, "I need to move, Rob." It was David. He said he's already on his way back and will be home around 6 p.m. as usual. Rob joked in response, "Well, at least you got the early warning phone call he promised you." Lauren hugged him, said goodbye, and then quickly ran to the bathroom to take a shower. Routine and habits took over as Rob dressed and left the room, heading to the gym for his standard workout. On the way home, Lauren was more concerned about David's early return home and his joyful mood about the project turning for the better. She thought he would come home late and probably burnt out from meetings and travels, but he would likely want to be intimate tonight after missing most of the week. Still a bit nervous, she turned the corner, approached her home, and saw David's car already parked in the driveway. She made good time in Friday traffic. She murmured aloud, parking her Accord next to his new Civic. She thought he might want to pounce on her as soon as she entered, so she believed that a preemptive suggestion of a nice celebratory dinner might be a good idea. David was on pins and needles hearing Lauren's car in the driveway. This would be the first time he would see her since he learned for sure that she was a cheater. Bags packed and in the car, the note prepared. All he needed was the recording pen. He sat in the living room to catch Lauren as soon as she arrived. "Hi, honey," Lauren exclaimed, entering and seeing David rising from his chair. "Looks like everything went well. Why don't we go somewhere to eat and celebrate?" she asked as they embraced and kissed each other. "That sounds great, especially since I got home earlier. Why don't you go upstairs and change, and I'll order a table somewhere," David suggested. Lauren readily agreed and tossed her work bag and purse on the table before heading upstairs to the master bedroom. David waited until he heard the shower start, then approached her purse and retrieved the pen. He pressed rewind and then play. He heard the beginning of the lovers' conversation and quickly turned off the pen. "Well, that settles it. Time to get out of here," David said, pulling out his note for Lauren and leaving it on the table next to her bags. Standing in the doorway, David looked back at their home, sadly realizing that things between him and her would never be the same. Lauren hurried into the shower, quickly got dressed, and descended with her still damp ponytail. She assumed he might be hungry after the trip and probably wanted to have love later. Not finding him in the living room, she headed to the kitchen and saw the note lying on the table. Taking it and starting to read, she gasped. "No, God, no, this can't be. Lauren, I know about your affair. I couldn't believe it was true, but your daytime meeting at the motel dispelled all doubts. You crushed my soul and I am so sad and angry that I can't be around you. I won't be here for a night or two while I try to gather my thoughts. And then I'll call you to arrange a time for our conversation. Do not try to contact me or find me. Trust me when I say I should not see you until I'm ready. David. David left the house and drove to a hotel, settling into his room. He had dinner downstairs, ordered a double scotch on the rocks, and reluctantly returned to the room to listen to the recording of Lauren's betrayal of their marital vows. Sitting in the chair at the writing desk, he turned on the recorder and heard the next sound as soon as Lauren entered the room. "Lauren, hi, Ross. I can't believe we've already finished this. Both in meetings and in time. I didn't think we'd breeze through at least 5 meetings and within 30 days. Rob, hi, Lauren, you. Yes, I thought it would take more time. We spent much more time planning and preparing than executing. I suppose that's the result of good planning, isn't it? I guess. I have to say, I'm glad it's over. The stress of hiding our affair is getting to me, and I understand why long-term affairs usually end in a catastrophic outcome. Yeah, same here. I know my wife has no idea, but I see how this could easily stop over time. You said David won't be in town until late tonight, right? I thought we couldn't celebrate today by having a drink together to mark our success and finish, so to speak. On a high note, that was quite unconvincing, Rob. I'm kind of in, but rules are rules, so we won't do anything new that wasn't on the list. Lauren and Rob parted ways, and David heard the kisses and tender sounds emanating from Lauren. David listened to the entire 90-minute illicit merger between Lauren and Rob. 2 things struck him. Firstly, everything seemed normal, even ordinary, and David couldn't fathom why Lauren would risk her marriage for the same. David knew the affair was real. They had met 5 times, but he still had no inkling of the why behind it. Friday night was mostly sleepless for both David and Lauren. Eventually, David gave in, realizing there was nothing more to extract from the recording, deciding to make use of the weekend and work-free freedom. He messaged Lauren, "I'll come to your place at 11 a.m. to talk if that's okay with you." Lauren grabbed her phone upon hearing the incoming message ping. "Yes, I did. I'm so sorry I've caused you pain." David ignored Lauren's response. Arriving shortly before 11 a.m., David trudged to the front door and rang the doorbell. Lauren opened the door. "David, you don't need to ring the doorbell at your own house." "I just felt awkward walking in," David replied. "Shall we sit at the kitchen table and discuss the next steps?" Lauren was displeased with David's businesslike behavior and how this discussion was unfolding. Seated at the table, facing each other, time momentarily stood still, And then David cleared his throat and asked a question that shook Lauren to the core. Do you deny in any meaningful way the facts of what I've learned about your involvement with Rob? Tears welled up in Lauren's eyes as she contemplated David's question and how focused and businesslike he was. In her view, this conversation was supposed to make David understand that nothing she did changed her feelings for him, and that her affair with Rob was just to prove their work colleagues wrong. David only knew about the senseless love and nothing about Lauren's work conversations that led to Rob and Lauren's plan to prove their colleagues wrong. David, before we go any further, you must first understand that Rob and I did this only to prove that we could have an affair. And no one would find out. A few months ago, many of us at work were discussing affairs and how they almost always get discovered, as well as the tragic consequences they cause in marriages. The discussion split into two camps. Some thought any affairs beyond a one-night stand would inevitably be exposed. Others believed that keeping something more significant than a one-night stand secret would require some planning, and, of course, a fair amount of deception, but it could be done. Rob and I ended up in the latter camp, and then we talked about the precautions that would be necessary. Wait a second, are you saying this was just an experiment or a game? Just to see if you could have an affair that would go unnoticed? Yes. Essentially, that's it. The discussions about it turned into a game. The hypotheses we laid out over a few lunches just took on a life of their own, and eventually we detailed everything quite thoroughly. We were confident we could pull it off, but therein lay the hitch. To truly succeed, it meant that not a soul could or would ever find out about what we achieved. In short, we decided to test our plan, fully aware that Rob loved his wife as much as I love you, and that this game, if you will, meant nothing in terms of our relationship. We don't love each other. We love our spouses. We delivered the best of our lives. We deliberately did nothing wrong. I used to have a faithful wife, and now I don't. Yes, I guess now that you know that's true. But if you had never found out, you would believe that I was faithful. In my heart, it was meaningless love. Throughout this month, if you wanted me after Rob and I were together, I never refused you. All right, Lauren, careless seconds, no harm done? I feel all warm and fuzzy now. Listen, I know you were in pain, and you must feel terrible hearing what you did. I genuinely regret causing you pain, but I hope the details I've shared can dispel any doubts about my love for you and erase any thoughts about my feelings for Rob. No love, no feelings. It's just because, you know, it's a terrible thing now. Rob and I were very careful, and we were sure that we would never be discovered. We never thought it would harm our marriages. Okay, so that's a long story to essentially admit that you betrayed me for a month. Slept with a man who isn't your husband about 5 times, and fully intended to keep this affair a secret from me, your husband, until the end of our lives together. Going back to my initial question, I assume you're not denying any of the disgusting facts about what I've learned about your activities with Rob. Lauren slumped a bit under the renewed direct assault on her justifications. Yes, I suppose the facts are as they are, but the reasons behind them must matter. There was no passion between us. We just needed to prove that we could conceal an affair. It was meaningless for both of us. David grappled between the thought that Lauren might have swallowed a bottle of foolish pills last month and the question of whether she always adhered to such absurd beliefs. I truly believe that part of your story. It doesn't seem like there was much passion between the two of you. Exactly, David. There was no passion. I know it hurts you, but I'm willing to do anything to atone for my guilt. Hold on. This is still nonsense. All this justification of it was just an affair is nonsense, and you must know that very well. We talked about being faithful when we decided to be exclusive. We discussed it in detail when talking about marriage. We exclusively dated for almost a year, and we talked again before I proposed. We specifically promised each other fidelity during premarital counseling and in our wedding vows. I don't recall a single mention of the escape clause. It was just an affair. Lauren saw that arguing with their history was pointless. David, you're right. We did discuss fidelity in detail. The point I'm trying to convey is that we are on the same page where it matters, considering our love for each other. I've loved only you for the past 7+ years, and never felt the slightest inclination towards Rob. If playing Yahtzee with Rob 5 times a month could matter, we would have done that instead. It seemed more like the foolish pills were to blame for everything. And then David latched onto what Lauren had just said. So why didn't you just play Yahtzee? Or did you have to play backgammon? Or just to do something else? Anything other than just an affair? You made it clear that engaging in this with Rob wasn't necessary. You also said that not a single soul would ever find out about this affair. So you could have done something else in that hotel room, and it would have looked and smelled like an affair. Mission accomplished, right? To prove that you can have an affair, you didn't actually need to make love. You still needed to hide your activities from our spouses. So there was still a share of guilt in that you still left work early, so you would still have to conceal it. Lauren's head tilted to the side as she contemplated David's challenge, and she felt herself quickly sinking deep. Lauren couldn't come up with any other justifications to overcome his assumption. Since no one would ever know whether they did it or not, actually didn't matter. To win their little unspoken bet, they just needed to play act. They could play out the intrigue with all the necessary secrets in Hotel Rendezvous. So why did she actually make love? I don't know, David. I never thought about that aspect of secrecy. We planned a secret affair to see if we could do it. Then we decided to test our plan. It was just assumed that we would go all the way to the end. Lauren, all day today, you used the word just to minimize what you did, like saying just a second or just a little. When, in fact, what you did inflicted serious damage. And it's the worst thing either of us could have done to our marriage. The fact that you don't see this yourself is possibly worse than you sleeping with another man 5 times a month. To you, it's almost like you slept with him only 5 times. So it's not a big deal. Well, it's very important to me. And at the moment we haven't moved anywhere. So I'm leaving for now. David left. I'm going to go to the hotel. On Monday, he canceled work and began contemplating Lauren's arguments. He couldn't believe that she thought so little of her fidelity, brushing it aside to win a phantom bet against co-workers who knew nothing. Enough of this, thought David to himself. I could sit here, torture myself, and try to find some explanation for her actions. But there isn't one. It wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal of her commitments to him. Her precious vows to keep those commitments to him forever, until death do us part. What ultimately surprised David the most was that, as terrible as his final decision was, he felt surprisingly at ease with it. He felt better than ever since receiving that email. Without losing hope, Lauren willingly agreed to another meeting the next day. "What's this?" asked Lauren, quickly scanning the stack of papers. "It's just divorce," replied David.